man-made uh, processes and products, all of this leads to emission of greenhouse gases. So you can see from this that the entire human activity, especially after industrialization, when we started using fossil fuels, almost everything that we do, either in our personal lives or professional lives, all the infrastructure that we use around us, all of this is responsible for greenhouse gas emissions, and all of this is contributing to climate change. So these are some numbers. Before industrialization, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was about 250 ppm. ppm is parts per million. So if you took the entire atmosphere, divided it into 1 million pieces, out of that only 250 pieces was carbon dioxide. And because of this, the average temperature of the planet was about 13.7 degrees centigrade. Now, today, in the 2020s, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is about 410 ppm. That means nearly close to double almost. And in that process, the average temperature of the earth has also gone up by close to about 1 degree centigrade. So this doesn't seem much, like 1 degree centigrade increase, why should we bother about it? But remember that we are not talking about the temperature of any specific location here. This is a mathematically calculated value of a temperature, which is an indicator of the of our climatic conditions. So how, for example, if you take the annual average temperature of, say, Pune, or annual average temperature of Mumbai, annual average temperature of New York, of Tokyo, of Berlin, of Johannesburg, Sydney, you go to every part of the world and take annual average temperature of that location, and then you took the average of all those numbers. That is the number that we are talking about. So this is not really a temperature in the sense we sense temperature, but it is a mathematically calculated number, which is just an indicator of the health of our climate. So increase by 1 degree centigrade in the average temperature of the planet is sort of like a fever for the planet. Now, these are just numbers, but what do these numbers really mean? What is the impact of this increase in temperature, average temperature that we have seen? We are already experiencing many of these impacts. The polar ice caps are melting, glaciers are melting, all of that ice is ending up in the oceans. And that is increasing the level, the sea level is rising. Also, a lot of the heat gets absorbed directly by oceans. So the oceans are also getting warmer, and that is expanding the water. That is also leading to increase in sea level. And therefore we are as it is, the planet is 70% water, and now the water is occupying even more space, so the land area available for terrestrial organisms like us is reducing. Another impact of this warmer sea is that the cold and warm currents in the oceans are getting disrupted, and that has a direct impact on cloud formation, and that has a direct impact on how the rain moves around the planet, and that has repercussions for even the winter and summer weather conditions. So we are seeing disruption of weather patterns everywhere across the planet. And one of the offshoots of that is increase in natural disasters. We are seeing more cyclones, more droughts, more floods. We are also seeing increase in some diseases because of the warmer temperatures. So even increase in snowfall, increase in heat waves as well as cold waves. So please understand that the average temperature of the planet going up doesn't mean that everywhere things are becoming only warmer. The winters are also becoming more severe in some locations because of this climate change. And as the temperature number will keep on increasing, all of these impacts will become more frequent and more intense. Their severity will go on increasing. So I mentioned carbon footprint just now. So if you took the total greenhouse gas emission that humans are putting today in the atmosphere and divided that by the total population of the world, that gives us the per capita global carbon footprint. Per person, how much greenhouse gas emission is going into the climate. So this number, per capita global carbon footprint, currently is about 5 ton carbon dioxide equivalent. That means every year per person, about 5 ton carbon dioxide is going into the atmosphere. This is, of course, increasing as we still continue to increase our use of fossil fuels. And that is because of that, we are headed towards a world that would be 3 degrees centigrade warmer than the pre-industrial period by 2100. Now already our temperature increase is about zero point 0.8 degrees centigrade, and already we are seeing various impacts around us. If this temperature is higher by 3 degrees centigrade, you can just imagine the kind of impacts that will be seen across the world. So scientists have been trying to figure out how to address this problem. One thing we have to realize is that you cannot reverse this process now. You cannot get back to the conditions that were there before the industrial era. The only thing that we can do is try to slow down this process. So researchers have figured out that if we can get this per capita global carbon footprint to be less than 2 ton carbon dioxide equivalent, then by 2100, the world will be only about 1.5 degrees centigrade warmer. This is still bad, but it will not be so devastating that billions of people will be just wiped out, which is likely to happen if we go for the 3 degrees centigrade warmer world. So we can survive 1.5 degrees centigrade warmer world. It will still be difficult. Life will be difficult for many people, but still human civilization as a whole will survive. So that is the equation. From 5 tons, we want to get down to less than 2 tons. So that is more than half of the greenhouse gas emissions have to be reduced. And this reduction really has to happen very, very rapidly so that we can cope with the climate change by slowing it down. uh, IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This is an international organization that studies climate change and these assessment reports are expected to guide sixth sixth assessment report of IPCC, IPCC AR6. This was published about an year and a half ago, and this has three important messages for the world. One is there is a rapid increase in greenhouse gas concentrations in the recent past, and this is now, there is no doubt about it that this is a result of human actions. There is no natural phenomenon contributing to this. We are currently on the way to be 1.5 degrees centigrade warmer by 2050 itself. where we want to push that date now to 2100. So 50 years ahead, we want to push that date. So if even if what the countries have committed currently under Paris Agreement, even if all of those commitments are actually fulfilled, and let me tell you that the record of the countries across the world so far is not all that great. They have not been able to fulfill the commitments made under previous agreements. So this is a very optimistic scenario, that if we actually see each and every government meeting its commitments under Paris Agreement, even then the earth will be 1.5-degree warmer by 2050. If we want to avoid that, this decade is the most important period. We must achieve very rapidly. We need to cut down our GHG emissions. That means we have to start reducing our use of fossil fuels in this decade. That means in the remaining 8 years. So before by 2030, if our use of fossil fuels, which is currently rising every year, if that starts dropping, then and then only we will be in a position to push that date of 1.5 degrees centigrade ahead towards 2100. So what we do here and now today has become very, very critical across the world. As far as India is concerned, we actually have a very unique kind of a problem, because on one hand, today we are one of the uh, top five contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. So we are the top five causes of climate change, future climate change. But at the same time, we are also among the top five most vulnerable countries in the world. That means top five countries who are going to be hit the most by climate change. So how does this work out? Um, as far as our emissions are concerned, historically, over the last 200 years, we haven't really contributed much to climate change. Even now, if you take our country's total emissions and divide by the population, our per capita emissions are pretty low. We are still below 2 ton carbon dioxide equivalent, which is actually what is the threshold that is needed to stay on track for solving the problem. However, because of our large size and high population, currently, if you count the annual greenhouse gas emissions from different countries, we are the third largest contributor. And therefore, our contribution, which we are putting in the atmosphere today, is going to decide what kind of impacts will come tomorrow. And that is why there is a lot of pressure on India politically to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. However, if you look on the impact side, we have a long coastline. And as the sea level increases, our land area is shrinking, our coasts are getting inundated. We are also now seeing higher frequency and intensity of cyclones. The East Coast has seen cyclones before also, but now 2 or 3 cyclones are coming every year. The West Coast used to see cyclones like once or twice in 100 years. Now we are seeing 1 or 2 cyclones every year. So that is really a visible and directly recognizable impact of climate change. We are also seeing a breakdown of ecosystems, marine and coastal ecosystems, which is going to have a direct impact on the livelihoods of the fishing communities. If you go to the north, we have the Himalayas, and glaciers in the Himalayas are melting away. So right now there is a lot of water up there, and whenever there is a heavy rainfall, all that water gushes down, and that is why currently we are seeing increased flooding. But as the water starts disappearing, in the future, North India will see water scarcity. I mean, think about a river like Ganga going dry for at least a few months in a year. If something like that starts happening, that will have huge implications, because there is a bloom of agriculture in North India, that is our bread basket for the entire country, because of all the water that is there. If the water disappears, that's going to have a direct impact on food security. Apart from that, nationwide we are seeing, especially in summer season, there is an increased instance of heat waves now, and in general the weather is hotter and drier, and those are the conditions very conducive for forest fires. So that's why we are seeing an increase in forest fires. We are also seeing sort of vicious cycles of drought and floods, especially Marathwada has been hit like that in the last few years. There will be a long dry spell, and then suddenly there is too much rainfall. So either is not very good for people or agriculture. So collectively, we are seeing drop in agricultural yields, and for a country whose population is still increasing, this is really a very, very serious problem. Another interesting thing here is that the emissions are primarily coming from cities and industries, whereas the impacts are coming for fishing communities, traditional communities, subsistence farmers, farmers who are rain fed, basically people whose livelihoods are closely linked with natural processes. So these are the people who are getting impacted, and people who are emitting is a different population group in the country. So there is that socio-economic and political tension also in dealing with climate change in India. So this is not just an academic or scientific or technological problem, it is also a socio-economic and political problem. So what can we do in this case? There are a few things that we can do as individuals. One is, we can first figure out or try to find out what is our personal contribution to climate change. Because as I said before, now living in the industrial society, even a person living in rural areas is contributing something to the climate change. But the contribution is primarily coming from urban areas and emerging cities like Baramati is, for example. So people living in these areas have to be more conscious about what greenhouse gas emissions we are putting in the atmosphere. What is our personal carbon footprint? So you can actually calculate this by using a web app that I have developed. You can find that web app on the website of climatecollectivepune.org. If you just Google search Climate Collective Pune, you will find this website. On that, you will find a link to this web app, and you can put in your own energy use and other data. There are just 5 pieces of data that you have to put in, and that will tell you what is your family's and your personal carbon footprint. It will also tell you where your carbon footprint is coming from, which activities in your life are responsible for your greenhouse gas emissions. And then you can figure out how you can reduce that. So, for example, if it is electricity, then you can examine how exactly you are using electricity in your house. Can you do something to reduce electricity consumption? If it is traveling around, petrol diesel consumption for your vehicle, then you can do some introspection on how can you reduce your traveling around, or can you do some kind of vehicle pooling, or can you use public transport? So it basically gives a direction to your thinking towards reducing your own carbon footprint. So this is one exercise that we can do. But as I said, for India, the impacts of climate change are also an important thing that we have to look at. So try to assess what is the climate vulnerability for your family or the location that you are living in. So talk to long-term local residents in your neighborhood. Ask them these questions: which weather-related impacts they have seen over the last 25, 30 years? How have the impacts changed over the years? Are they seeing, for example, more of drought, or more of flooding, or more of lightning? Whatever are their observations, what have they themselves done to minimize risk for themselves? I mean, people are pretty smart. They are not just sitting around waiting for disasters to happen. When they start seeing changes, they also figure out solutions. So there is a lot of innovation at the grassroots level, which needs to be understood and documented. And finally, to really make that area risk proof, what support is needed from local authorities? How can you then get that support? You can figure out, you can work with your neighbors and figure out a process by which you can make your area risk proof by involving the local municipal corporation or gram panchayat or whatever it may be. In order to be climate ready, we actually have to work in four areas. Two of these are related with reducing our carbon emissions, and two are related with dealing with the impacts. Mitigation means you reduce your dependence on energy. You follow an idea of sufficiency. Sufficiency means you use the most efficient technology, but only up to the scale where you actually need it. Many times what happens is when the efficiency increases, people tend to use more, and therefore the energy use still remains high. So that trap has to be avoided. You also then, once you figure out how much energy actually you do need, then you try to replace fossil energy with renewable energy in your homes or in your workplaces and so on. You also need to sequester, you have to hold back carbon on the planetary surface. To do that, you should do waste minimization. You should focus on creating carbon sinks. Now, creating carbon sinks does not mean planting billions of trees. That is just nonsense. Look at whatever is the natural ecosystem in a patch of land and try to restore that land to the natural form. It can be a wetland, it can be a lake, it can be a river, it can be a stream, it can be a grassland, or it can be a forest. So just replanting everywhere arbitrarily is not going to address this problem. We have to focus on ecosystem restoration. And there are also some technological interventions that can be done to remove carbon from the atmosphere and hold it on the ground. As far as adaptation or dealing with the problems is concerned, we need to focus on adaptation. That means understand how the weather patterns are changing in our locality and align local processes with these new patterns. Agriculture particularly, just because things have worked for the last few thousand years, now the conditions are changing. So maybe we need to change the crops, we need to change the pattern, the period when you do sowing and how your plant will evolve, how your crop will evolve. All of that will change now because the weather pattern is changing. So the farmers have to align their processes with the weather pattern, and that is true of all the sectors actually. And then disasters will happen because the conditions are changing. We have to prepare to face those disasters. So identify groups which are going to be hit the most, support them in building their adaptive capacity, and prepare local disaster management plans involving local communities. This is an area where a lot of work needs to happen, and I think educational campuses and students really can play a key role here, working with the surrounding communities. So this is a question that we have to now almost on a daily basis. Every morning when we get up, we have to ask ourselves, are we climate ready? Because we are living in a very, very critical decade, and we really have to learn to overcome this problem. We have to acquire those skills as soon as possible in order to survive this very difficult period. From our side, I am representing here Samuchit Envirotech, and I am also leading a national level network which is trying to raise awareness and helping vulnerable communities and so on. So there are a few things that we are offering, especially for young people. There is an online course on climate change, science, politics, ethics, and action. This course gives a sort of a 360-degree view of what is going on currently in the world around climate change, with a bit of an India focus, of course. We also offer an online course on basic carbon accounting. I talked about carbon footprinting and I mentioned that you can do it for your family. But increasingly, carbon footprinting is becoming
Hello. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You're audible.
I think
Ma'am is
ma'am is having an issue in the internet.
issue. I think so. Internet problem.
I will just call ma'am.
Yes, sir.
I think there is issue at ma'am's end. So I regret about it. Ma'am will be joining soon. I have messaged ma'am. She will be joining soon.
Yeah, I think I'm back. Sorry, I
Okay.
lost connection and then it was
Yeah, no issues, ma'am.
not
Now you are
connecting.
audible clearly
Yeah,
and yeah,
yeah.
easily.
The can you make me co-host again?
Yes, 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 yes. Just a
Yeah.
minute. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. So as I was saying, we are offering several online resources for young people. One is a course on climate change, science, politics, ethics, and action, which sort of gives a 360-degree view on what is going on currently globally with an India focus. The other course is actually linked with employability in a sense. This is an online course on basic carbon accounting. Carbon footprinting I already mentioned, and you will get a flavor of that if you visit the Climate Collective Pune website and do the carbon accounting using the carbon footprint calculator there. But this is becoming very, very crucial now for organizations as well as businesses to know how their activities are impacting this crisis, either as a contributor or as a solution provider. And therefore, understanding the basic principles of carbon accounting is becoming a useful additional skill that employers will look for in addition to the academic qualifications. So that this is what we foresee happening in the next 5 to 10 years, and that is why we have launched this course. By doing this, you can acquire this additional skill and become more useful for your employers. We are also trying to put together a course on citizenship for sustainable urbanization. Specifically, this will be useful for young people in Maharashtra, which is the most urbanizing state in India, and India is one of the most urbanizing countries in the world. So this process of urbanization, if we right from the beginning follow the path of sustainability and climate readiness, then a lot of the problems that cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Pune, etc., are facing now will can be avoided by emerging cities. We in India, by 2100, all the urban infrastructure that will exist in the country, 90% of that is yet to be created. So this is a huge opportunity, and most many entrepreneurial opportunities, job opportunities will be linked with urbanization. So from that perspective, we are trying to put together a course along these lines. In addition to that, we are also now trying to encourage green entrepreneurship, and several activities have been started on those lines. One of the things that we are doing very soon is on 5th of March in Pune. We are holding an exhibition for green entrepreneurs, particularly startups. So if any of you can come and visit on that day, it might be quite interesting, because we are also trying to have some experts come in and talk to young people about entrepreneurship opportunities in the environmental and climate change sector. So these are some of the things that we have been doing. You can connect with me on my email, and do visit our websites, samuchit.com and inec.net. Uh, we are currently actually conducting a lot of activities online, which started because of the COVID period. But we intend to continue doing online activities because that is allowing us to reach to people who are even far away from us. So if you connect with Citizens of Sustainable City on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you will get to know about our upcoming activities and you can participate in some of those also. So I'll stop here and I'll be happy to answer questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
I guess one student, Sanskar Biradar, he has raised his hand. Sanskar, would you like to ask any question? Sanskar Biradar, do you have any question to ask?
It's not audible.
Okay, he's not audible. Anyone else want to ask question? He or she can ask the question. The session is open to everyone.
I think there's Yash.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
My name is Yash Shukla. Good morning. My question was that are electric vehicles really that eco-friendly? Because once I read a life cycle study, a peer-reviewed life cycle study, and it had a data that shows that EVs require batteries, which in turn requires minerals like cobalt, graphite, lithium, and manganese.
Yeah.
And to mine those elements and process those elements, carbon emission is cost.
Yeah.
Now, according to the same study, the total CO2 emission that the EV will do in its entire lifetime, 50% of that emission is just made to produce those batteries. Also, the same study showed that it was found that brand new EV car waiting in the showroom has caused around 30,000 pounds of greenhouse gas emission, whereas a traditional car in the showroom has caused 14,000 pounds of greenhouse gas emission. Also, problem remains that later EV cars needs to be charged with the electricity. Now, if that electricity comes from a coal-based power plant, then it will produce 9 ounces of CO2 per kilometer, whereas traditional cars produced 7.5 ounces of CO2 per kilometer. And if we charge those EV cars using green sources, then it will take around 1.4 lakh kilometer so that it will become more greener than the traditional car. That is, it will produce less emission than a traditional car. So it will be just like around 24% reduction in the CO2 emission. So is it really that electric vehicles are that eco-friendly?
Yeah, good question. And this has been debated a lot. And based on the units that you are using, I suppose this is an American study that you are quoting.
Yeah.
There are a couple of things to take into account here. One is that when you run a vehicle on petrol or diesel, you are mining on a daily basis for every trip. Whereas when you are talking about mining for making a battery, that battery is made once and that is going to give you several trips. So that comparison is not very valid when you say that 1 kilogram of petrol causes this much emission and 1 kilogram of the battery material causes this much emission. The emissions need to be counted on the basis of how much driving, how much distance covered as a result of that emission. So for that, the electric vehicle is a clear winner. Secondly, all the materials that we are using today for electric batteries, yes, those also need to be mined. Almost every material that we use is mined. All these materials are actually recyclable. So there is an interesting possibility that emerges then, that okay, today we are mining and we are making all these batteries, but as these vehicles will start going out, as they reach their end of life, material can be harvested from these batteries and reused. So the future mining requirement then reduces. That's point number two. The third point is related to the coal fired or coal based electricity being used for charging. Again, as our energy systems themselves are transforming, coal based electricity will eventually be phased out and it will be replaced by renewable energy. So at least that possibility exists with electric vehicles, where you can have renewable powered mobility. If you stick to petrol diesel vehicles, then that possibility doesn't exist there at all. You have to understand that no new technology comes on board totally perfected and providing all 100% solutions. You have to give it time to grow. If there are possibilities which are promising, then it is important to support this technology today so that it will continue to evolve, develop. At least the EV industry is today acknowledging that these problems do exist and research and development is happening on these problems. The petroleum industry has a history of misleading people. In as early as 1960s, petroleum industry knew that use of petroleum is going to produce climate change, and there are now documents coming out which show that they had already projected the impacts, but they chose to not reveal that information, misleading people into continuing to depend on petroleum. So I don't really see any other option but to move towards electric mobility if we really are thinking long term to solve climate change. Also, even now, look at all the cities in India. We are facing huge air quality problem. The standard reading of air quality is poor, and sometimes it becomes extremely poor. So if we want to improve air quality in the cities, then we have to firstly reduce the number of vehicles in cities, and whatever vehicles are there, if they move to electric mobility, we are immediately addressing the problem of air quality. So one should think from a holistic perspective. You are immediately solving air quality and related health issues, and you are creating a very strong possibility of mobility not contributing to climate change. Both of From both of these counts, electric vehicles are actually something that should be supported rather than make these unfair comparisons.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, in addition with this, ma'am, I would like to say something. As an electrical engineer, I want to say that we are going and we are moving towards electric vehicles. We are not creating pollution through this vehicle, but somewhere we are creating more electricity demand. Right, ma'am, as you said, like we are using conventional energy source like coal we are using for producing the electricity. So we are not producing here, but somewhere we are producing the pollution. So the research which is going on right now, it's towards the use of renewable energy, that is solar energy, to produce electricity, by which we can actually create means reducing the pollution. Air pollution, it is, if it is not creating here, it is somewhere creating
Right now, but eventually
but
that
eventually
will also get solved.
it's also been seen that the vehicles were introduced and then the engines they started means innovative technology started. Unless we start using electric vehicles, the innovation will not start. So it's brought for our use, and it's started for the same reason that we should go for renewable energy. And your saying was right that here we are not creating a pollution, but thermal power plants are creating it.
Yes, but then that gets diffused. See, air pollution created in a congested location is much more harmful than air pollution created in an isolated location. Also, there is one more interesting point that nobody is talking about. Electric vehicles get charged 80% of the time in your house. Whereas for petrol diesel, you need petrol pumps and this entire system of transporting petrol diesel across the country. So if we move towards electric vehicles, think about all the land that gets available, that becomes available, because petrol pumps will be gone. Electric charging stations
Yes,
doesn't really make sense. You can have electric chargers in a restaurant, you can have electric chargers in a shop.
yes.
So this is another interesting phenomenon that is happening, that all the land which is occupied by the entire petroleum supply chain, that a lot of that will free up, and that becomes available maybe for creating carbon sinks or creating other infrastructure. So there are a lot of these triggers which can happen and will have unexpected bonus outcomes.
Yes, definitely. So any other questions from participants?
Thank you, ma'am, for answering that question. Also, I had another question.
Yeah.
Recently, before some years, I guess if I'm not wrong, Brazil was that country which actually started promoting ethanol-based cars. So after some time, there was a decline in ethanol-based cars. I guess there was a problem in ethanol production, and then it failed, and then they again started revamping that full ethanol-based
Yeah.
car thing. So right now, should we as India should also go towards ethanol production and ethanol based cars, or shall we just go forward in EV only?
So any fuel, if you want to make, especially biofuels, one has to be very careful about the overall life cycle, because if you are transporting biomass to make biofuels, then you are burning a lot of diesel to make some fuel. So that energy balance has to work out positively. And that is why this type of centralized biofuel manufacturing has never really succeeded. Economically it is not viable, energy wise also it is not really viable. So think about the whole biodiesel fiasco that we had. However, when it comes to ethanol, ethanol actually has multiple uses. It is a food item also. It has industrial applications, and it can be used as fuel. So you can then say that there are multiple uses being satisfied by this biofuel, and therefore, and we already have existing factories and supply chains already established. One problem that I see in India, we will have to reduce sugar production if we want to ramp up ethanol production, and that has direct consequences culturally for the country. I mean, sugar prices going up have brought down governments. So politically that becomes a very very tough decision to make. So this is not just a simple, many of these problems cannot be looked at only from a technology perspective, but one also has to look at the overall social, cultural, economic ecosystem in which that phenomenon is operating. Brazil didn't have that problem. They basically shut down sugar production and converted to ethanol production, and they did manage to actually substitute most of the petroleum that was being imported, mainly in the mobility sector, and managed therefore to save a lot of foreign currency. And it really worked out for them, but that doesn't mean that it will work out everywhere. But in any case, we do have ethanol blending happening in fossil fuels, which is also a good way of finding a sort of the middle ground, where instead of trying to revamp all the engines, we are slowly introducing ethanol in there. There are also people talking about hydrogen fuel, so there are various options coming up. But currently electric vehicle, the technology seems to have reached a level of maturity where it is ready to get out and go. And it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't have to be one technology which solves the whole problem, right? You can have a basket of solutions. So the more the merrier, the more diversity you have, the more options you have, the better flexibility it gives to people.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for answering. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else who want to ask the question?
Yes, yes, sir. May I ask one question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So I have one question. Actually, one of the greatest scientist, Dr. Stephen Hawking, before his death, he predicted some predictions, 5 things. How will be the this nature or this beautiful earth will be in red zone or will be destroyed? And
Mhm.
one of reason is that the global warming and heat will be increased more and more. And
Mhm.
due to this reason, the coming future will be in red zone for this beautiful planet and the human being also. So my
Mhm.
question is that, so how to prevent this beautiful planet Earth and human being life due to this technology we made the nature very disturbed, and that's why this nature is reflected in other way, and in coming future we will be face many different types of the problems. You said that the uh, uh, cold heat uh, cold and heat waves, the natural disaster, that the cyclones and all these things. So how we prevent our nature and human being?
Okay. So first we have to realize that the planet as such has now existed for about 4 billion years, and it will exist as long as the sun exists, and that is about another 6 billion years. If you look at the planetary conditions, how they have changed over the last 4 billion years, what is happening today is really nothing. There have been even more drastically different conditions on the planet, and life also started on the planet almost as soon as it got formed. And it has evolved over the last 4 billion years. So there are life forms on this planet which are capable of existing at the highest of temperatures in the most adverse conditions, in acidic conditions, and so on and so forth. So we have to understand that neither the earth nor life on earth is in danger, irrespective of what we do. The only thing that is endangered is our survival on the planet, because we are changing the conditions in such a way that they will no longer become suitable for us on this planet. And that is the big concern, the big crisis that we are facing today. I think I already mentioned what we need to do in order to address this crisis. We have to slow down climate change. We have to slow down global warming. And we have to also now focus on technology development in such a way that it will help us survive the changes that are now inevitable, changes that we cannot avoid. So let's not blame technology as such. It is the technology which has allowed us to improve our quality of life. We just need to change the direction of technology development in such a way that the problems that have been caused because of excessive use of fossil fuels will get addressed. We shift to other energy sources that will involve changes, drastic changes. But humans have seen drastic changes in the past also. We were hunter gatherers. Just about 11,000 years ago we became agriculturists and settled down. Just about 300 years ago we started building cities and became urbanized. So something which has existed for only a few hundred years, we can definitely change that in the next few decades and evolve an entirely different way of life, which is aligned with the climatic conditions. And we can also address the crisis. We have addressed global crisis before also. So I feel optimistic about our ability to solve these problems. However, it is really now come to a stage where it is up to my generation and your generation. We have to work together to address these issues in the best way possible. And that requires thinking outside the box, unlearning and relearning. And that's the kind of a process that we have to go through. We are in a way making history for the future, especially in this next 10, 20 years are going to be the most crucial.
And ma'am, I have one more question. So please, could you tell us about Lakshmi too, how it works and how it is beneficial, because I watched one or two videos on YouTube and I got that information from that. So please.
Okay. So this is a two-pot cook stove which uses biomass, and there is a chimney which takes the smoke outside the house. So this was developed by the researchers of Appropriate Rural Technology Institute, but on similar lines, there are other models that are available in other parts of India. This is the stove which particularly became popular in Western Maharashtra, which reduces fuel consumption compared to traditional cook stoves by about 50%. And and it also reduces smoke creation, and whatever little smoke is created, it is taken out of the house through the chimney. So in that way, it reduces air pollution in the kitchen and is therefore better for the health of women and children. And our approach always has been to train local people in building these stores, so that they can install them locally, make a business out of it. And locally there, then people also then have access to services, spare parts, and so on. So that has always been always been the idea behind this approach. So that was it. It's an old work from Aarti. And beyond that, through Samuchit and Enviro, we do training programs for this building these cook stove. But we take slightly different approach from what Aarti has been doing. What we are doing through Samuchit and Envirotech is we first go into the community and try to understand what kind of cooking practices are prevalent, what is being cooked, how it is being cooked, what type of fuels are available to people. There are always some unique features of cooking any village or any community. Once we understand that, we put in the required modifications. So sometimes, for example, we did one project in Sundarban area where the average family size is 12 people, and they are cooking mainly just rice and something to go with that. So that amounts to about almost 2 kilograms of rice being cooked daily. So the cooking pot is quite large, and therefore we had to change the shape and size of the stove to install there. So rather than going with a standard design, which has been called Lakshmi stove, we use the principles of building improved cook stoves, and based on the community requirements, we design the store to suit the local requirements, and then we train local people and get the work done through them. That has been the different approach that I have taken through my social enterprise.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so we are at the end of the session. I would request Rupali ma'am to please give a vote of thanks, and we would here conclude our session. Yeah.
Good noon, everyone. And I know you all are in hurry. So, but I would like to take only 3 minutes for vote of thanks. So please have a patience. First, thank you, Sheikh sir, giving me such an opportunity. And first of all, I would like to thank today's resource person, respected Dr. Priyadarshini Karve ma'am, for your valuable time and your wonderful talk. Yes, ma'am. Really, your talk was uh, uh, to inspiring us, and it was spellbound and inspired us. And I'm sure that after listening to the speech, everyone is going to learn something new. So we express our gratitude for your wonderful talk. And I want to mention one thing. You told or you said about the uh, carbon footprint calculator. Really, it is a wonderful concept, and you developed it. And uh, it is needed in today's scenario to work on that as every individual, how much you polluted our environment. So really, it is a very good concept. And thank you once again. And at the last, I would like to thank Honorable Principal Sir, Dr. Bijkar Sir, Vice Principal, Dr. Lande Sir, ED Cell Convener and IIC, Dr. Rangole Ma'am, IIC Coordinator, Mr. Sheikh Sir, all faculty, staff, and young engineers. Thank you. And it's declared to here the session as over. Thank you and adios.
Yeah, all participants should also fill the feedback form. The certificates will be soon sent to your email address. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.